Hey guys, tonight we're not just telling a story, we're diving into one of the greatest mysteries humanity has ever imagined. A city so beautiful, so powerful, that people have searched for it for more than 2,000 years. And the strange part? No one truly knows if it ever existed at all. Somewhere beneath dark ocean water, hidden under silence, sand, and time, there may once have been a civilization filled with golden temples, enormous harbors, and towering walls that touched the sky. A place richer than any kingdom of the ancient world. A city blessed by the gods themselves. Until one terrible night, when the sea swallowed everything. Gone. Without warning, without mercy. And ever since then, humans have been unable to let it go. Explorers searched for it, philosophers argued about it, dreamers imagined it. An entire generation stared out at the ocean wondering, what if Atlantis was real? Tonight, we leave behind the modern world, the noise, the lights, the endless distractions. And together, we drift slowly across dark, ancient waters toward a lost world that exists somewhere between history, myth, and dream. So get comfortable, dim the lights, take a slow, deep breath, and let the waves carry you gently into the mystery of Atlantis. Hey guys, tonight we're leaving behind ordinary history for something softer, stranger, and just a little unreal. So dim the lights, settle into your pillow, and let the noise of the modern world slowly drift away. Because tonight, we are sailing toward a city that may never have existed at all. And somehow, that only makes it more fascinating. Before we begin, imagine standing on the deck of an ancient ship at night. The sea is calm. Black water stretches endlessly in every direction. Above you, stars shimmer across the sky like scattered silver dust. And somewhere out there, hidden beneath the waves, lies a forgotten city. Or, at least, people hoped it did. Because humans love mysteries. Especially expensive-looking mysteries involving gold, temples, and dramatic destruction. Tonight's story is about Atlantis, the most famous lost city in history. A place described as wealthy, powerful, advanced, and doomed. A city swallowed by the sea in a single terrible night. Very dramatic. Ancient storytellers really understood branding. But here's the strange part. For all the movies, theories, books, documentaries, and deeply confident people on the internet, Atlantis comes from just one main source. One man. The Greek philosopher Plato. And honestly, trusting philosophers to tell simple stories is always risky because they never just say, here's a city. No, it becomes a moral lesson about society, politics, virtue, pride, and human failure. Very educational, slightly exhausting. Now, Plato wrote about Atlantis around 360 BCE in two dialogues called Timaeus and Critias. And according to him, Atlantis existed thousands of years earlier, beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. So, somewhere beyond the edge of the known Mediterranean world. Already mysterious, already distant. Exactly the kind of setup ancient people loved. According to Plato, Atlantis was enormous, rich, beautiful, filled with grand palaces, canals, temples, and shining walls. The island was supposedly blessed by the gods, which, historically speaking, is usually the first warning sign that things are about to go badly. At the center of Atlantis stood a magnificent temple dedicated to Poseidon, god of the ocean, earthquakes, horses. A surprisingly chaotic combination, honestly. Now, Poseidon supposedly fell in love with a mortal woman named Cleito. Classic mythology behavior. The gods really struggled with boundaries. To protect her, Poseidon created rings of land and water around her home. Circular canals, perfect symmetry, an island fortress surrounded by the sea. And from this union came the royal line of Atlantis, half divine, half human. Which sounds impressive until you remember Greek mythology rarely rewards anyone for being half divine. It usually ends in emotional collapse or transformation into a tree. Atlantis grew powerful. Its people became wealthy beyond imagination. Ships crossed the seas. Trade flourished. The city glittered with gold, silver, and a mysterious metal called orichalcum, which sounds like something a fantasy novelist invented at 2 a.m. But ancient writers took it very seriously. The Atlanteans built enormous harbors, massive walls, temples covered in precious metals, gardens, baths, training grounds. Everything carefully planned, everything elegant. And honestly, it sounds lovely. Like an ancient luxury resort with philosophical problems. But then, according to Plato, the people of Atlantis changed. They became greedy, proud, corrupted by power. The divine part of them faded. The human flaws took over. And suddenly, the city that once represented perfection became morally disappointing. Which is exactly the kind of thing philosophers enjoy writing about. The gods noticed. And in ancient stories, when gods notice human behavior, that's generally bad news. Zeus decided Atlantis needed punishment. Because apparently smiting civilizations was considered responsible leadership on Mount Olympus. Then came the disaster. Earthquakes, floods, chaos. And in a single terrible day and night, Atlantis disappeared beneath the sea. Gone, swallowed forever, leaving behind only legend. Now, here's the fascinating part. Plato may never have intended Atlantis to be understood as literal history. It may have been an allegory, a warning about arrogance, power, imperial ambition, the danger of moral decay. In other words, Atlantis may have been less missing civilization and more philosophical lecture with dramatic ocean effects. But people didn't care. Because once you tell humanity about a beautiful lost city buried underwater, they are absolutely going looking for it. Forever. And they did. For centuries. Some searched the Mediterranean Sea. Others searched the Atlantic Ocean. Some looked near Spain. Others pointed toward Greece, or the Caribbean, or Antarctica. Because eventually, every mystery ends with someone confidently blaming Antarctica. Now, let's pause for a moment and drift gently into the ancient world itself. Imagine sailors hearing these stories by firelight, waves crashing softly outside, maps incomplete, the world still full of blank spaces. Back then, it was entirely possible to believe a lost city waited somewhere beyond the horizon, because so much of the world remained unknown. And maybe that's part of Atlantis's power. Not whether it existed, but what it represents. A dream, a warning, a memory of something beautiful that vanished. Humans are strangely drawn to lost things. Lost cities, lost kingdoms, lost knowledge, lost worlds beneath the sea. Perhaps because deep down, we know nothing lasts forever. Not empires, not civilizations, not even magnificent islands blessed by gods. And yet, the idea survives. Atlantis still floats quietly through human imagination after more than 2,000 years. That's impressive longevity for a place that may never have existed at all. Now, let's drift farther next time, because in the next part, we'll explore the many theories about where Atlantis might have been inspired from. Ancient volcanic disasters, real civilizations lost to time, flood myths, earthquakes, and one particularly unlucky island that exploded so violently it may have helped create the legend itself, which, honestly, feels very Atlantis. So stay comfortable. Let the sea grow calm around you, and imagine distant waves rolling softly over forgotten ruins beneath the dark water. We're only beginning the journey. All right, welcome back. The sea is calm tonight. The stars are still above us. And somewhere beneath these dark, imaginary waters, Atlantis continues refusing to explain itself. Very mysterious behavior. Very on brand. Now, in the last part, we talked about Plato and his famous story of Atlantis. A powerful civilization destroyed in a single terrible catastrophe. And naturally, people spent the next 2,000 years asking, okay, but what if it was real? Because humans are deeply uncomfortable with unresolved mysteries, especially ancient ones, especially underwater ones. So tonight, let's drift through the many theories people have proposed over the centuries. Some reasonable, some strange. Some delivered with the confidence of a man holding a blurry map and absolutely no evidence. History is full of these people. One of the most famous theories connects Atlantis to the ancient island of Santorini, also known in ancient times as Thera. And honestly, this theory has some very interesting points. Thousands of years ago, Santorini was home to a flourishing Bronze Age civilization connected to the Minoan civilization. They built beautiful towns, complex buildings, advanced plumbing systems, colorful frescoes, trade networks stretching across the Mediterranean. Basically, they were doing extremely well, which in ancient history usually means a disaster is approaching, politely but rapidly. Around 1600 BCE, the volcano beneath Santorini erupted. Violently, catastrophically. And when historians say catastrophic, they mean catastrophic. The explosion was one of the largest volcanic eruptions in human history. Ash filled the sky. Tsunamis rolled across the sea. Entire settlements vanished. The landscape itself changed. Imagine waking up one morning to earthquakes, darkness, the sound of the earth breaking apart beneath you, then giant waves crashing into coastal cities. It must have felt like the end of the world. And honestly, for many people there, it probably was. Now, here's where Atlantis enthusiasts become very excited, because the similarities are hard to ignore. An advanced island civilization, destroyed suddenly, connected to the sea, lost beneath catastrophe. Could Plato have heard distant cultural memories of this disaster centuries later? Possibly. It's one of the more grounded theories, which means, naturally, some people find it less exciting, because subtle historical explanations rarely compete well against secret underwater super-civilization. Still, Santorini remains one of the strongest candidates for inspiring parts of the Atlantis legend. Now, let's gently float over to another theory. And this one takes us into flood myths, because nearly every ancient culture has them. Massive floods, cities swallowed by water, entire worlds destroyed. From Epic of Gilgamesh to biblical traditions to stories from Asia and the Americas, humans have long remembered water as both life-giving and terrifying. And that makes sense. Ancient civilizations often lived near rivers or coastlines. One flood could erase generations of work overnight. So naturally, those memories stayed alive. Some researchers think Atlantis may simply combine many ancient disaster stories into one powerful myth, a kind of cultural memory wrapped in philosophy and drama, which, honestly, is very human. We take fragments of truth, add imagination, stir gently for centuries, and suddenly we have a lost civilization with glowing temples. Now let's drift into stranger waters, because Atlantis theories eventually become wonderfully weird. Some people claimed Atlantis was in the Atlantic Ocean. Reasonable enough. Others suggested the Caribbean. Less convincing, but all right. Then came Antarctica. And this theory usually sounds something like, what if Atlantis was under the ice the whole time? Which ignores several inconvenient geological realities, but does create dramatic documentaries. Then there are theories involving aliens, ancient advanced technology, crystal energy, mystical powers, people wearing suspiciously shiny robes. And at some point, Atlantis quietly stops being archaeology and becomes a science fiction convention with candles. Now, to be fair, part of the reason these theories survive is because Atlantis never received a definitive explanation. There's enough uncertainty to keep imagination alive. And imagination loves open space, especially open space underwater. Now let's gently return to reality for a moment, because the real ancient world was already extraordinary enough. The civilizations of the Mediterranean built massive temples, complex cities, trade empires, astronomical systems, artworks of incredible beauty. People often underestimate ancient societies, as if humans only became intelligent after electricity and online shopping. But ancient people were remarkably capable, creative, observant, resourceful. So when we hear stories about magnificent lost cities, part of us wants them to be true, because we know ancient civilizations genuinely achieved astonishing things. Now, imagine standing on the shores of ancient Santorini before the eruption. White buildings glowing in sunlight, ships entering the harbor, markets filled with voices and color. Life moving peacefully forward. No one knowing the mountain beneath them was preparing to explode. That's the quiet sadness hidden inside many Atlantis theories. Not just the loss of a city, but the fragility of human confidence. Civilizations feel permanent while we're inside them. Stable, enduring, safe. Then nature reminds us, very gently or very violently, that permanence is often an illusion. And perhaps that's why Atlantis still resonates today, because it reflects a fear humans have always carried, that even great societies can disappear. Not with villains, not with dramatic speeches, but with water, fire, earthquakes, time. And yet the stories survive, passed from one generation to another, across centuries, across oceans, which means in a strange way, Atlantis never truly vanished at all. It remains alive in imagination, in books, in films, in quiet late-night conversations where someone says, "But what if it was real?" And honestly, that question may be more powerful than any answer. Next time, we'll drift even deeper into the ocean itself, into underwater ruins, sunken cities that actually exist, real archaeological discoveries beneath the sea. Because while Atlantis may remain uncertain, History has already given us plenty of drowned worlds to explore, and some of them are every bit as haunting as the legend. So rest easy. The waves are calm tonight. All right, let's continue drifting slowly tonight. The sea is darker now, calmer, and somewhere beneath it, old ruins sleep quietly under layers of sand and water. Not Atlantis, perhaps, but real places, real cities, real people whose worlds disappeared beneath the waves. And honestly, reality can sometimes feel just as dreamlike as legend. One of the strange things about humans is that we build very close to water, constantly. Rivers, coasts, harbors, lakes, which is practical, of course. Water means trade, food, transportation, life. Unfortunately, water also occasionally decides to reclaim everything. And history is filled with moments where entire towns simply vanished beneath it. So tonight, let's gently explore some real underwater ruins, places that blur the line between archaeology and myth. Let's begin near Egypt, because honestly, ancient Egypt always enters the conversation eventually. They were simply too dramatic to stay out of history. Off the coast near Alexandria lies the lost city of Thonis Heracleion. For centuries, people thought it might only be legend. Ancient texts mentioned it, stories survived, but the city itself seemed gone. Then divers found it. Statues resting underwater, temple ruins, stone blocks covered in sea growth, ancient ships buried beneath mud. A real city, submerged for more than 1,000 years, quietly sleeping beneath the Mediterranean. And imagine the feeling of discovering it, lowering yourself into dark water, flashlight cutting through the blue-green silence, and suddenly seeing the face of an ancient statue staring back at you. Calm, still, patient. That's the kind of moment that makes Atlantis hunters emotionally unstable for several decades. Because discoveries like this prove something important. Cities really can disappear. Not metaphorically, not poetically. Actually disappear. Earthquakes, floods, rising seas, human collapse. History is full of places people thought were gone forever, until someone accidentally found them again. Usually after ignoring local fishermen who had been saying the same thing for generations. Now, let's drift eastward for a moment, toward India. Off the coast near Dwarka, underwater structures have been discovered beneath the sea. Stone formations, walls, possible ruins. And, naturally, debate followed immediately. Because archaeologists enjoy debate almost as much as philosophers. Sometimes more. Some believe the site connects to ancient stories from Hindu tradition. Others argue the structures are natural formations mixed with later ruins everywhere. Now let's float gently toward Japan. Near Yonaguni Island lies one of the strangest underwater formations in the world. Huge stone terraces, sharp angles, massive steps descending into the sea. Some researchers believe it may be natural rock shaped by geological processes. Others insist it was built by humans long ago. And if you've ever watched documentaries about it, you know everyone involved sounds extremely certain, even when nobody fully agrees. The structure itself feels eerie, like a staircase leading down into another world, which of course immediately made people whisper, Atlantis. Because eventually every underwater structure becomes Atlantis for at least 15 minutes. Now let's pause for a softer thought. Why are we so fascinated by drowned cities? Perhaps because water changes things. It hides them, softens them, turns ordinary ruins into ghostly landscapes. Others argue the structures are natural formations mixed with later ruins everywhere. Now let's float gently toward Japan. Near Yonaguni Island lies one of the strangest underwater formations in the world. Huge stone terraces, sharp angles, massive steps descending into the sea. Some researchers believe it may be natural rock shaped by geological processes. Others insist it was built by humans long ago. And if you've ever watched documentaries about it, you know everyone involved sounds extremely certain, even when nobody fully agrees. The structure itself feels eerie, like a staircase leading down into another world, which of course immediately made people whisper, Atlantis. Because eventually every underwater structure becomes Atlantis for at least 15 minutes. Now let's pause for a softer thought. Why are we so fascinated by drowned cities? Perhaps because water changes things. It hides them, softens them, turns ordinary ruins into ghostly landscapes. A broken wall on land feels historical. A broken wall beneath the sea feels haunting. Fish glide through ancient doorways. Seaweed wraps around statues. Silence fills places once crowded with voices. There's something deeply dreamlike about it, almost peaceful. And perhaps that dreamlike quality is why Atlantis refuses to disappear from culture. It exists in that perfect space between possibility and fantasy. Now, imagine ancient sailors again, crossing dangerous waters at night, hearing stories about vanished islands, sunken kingdoms, cities destroyed by angry gods. The ocean itself encourages imagination because it hides so much. Even today, most of the deep ocean remains unexplored, which means somewhere below us right now, there are landscapes no human eyes have ever seen. That's incredible to think about quietly before sleep. Slightly unsettling, but incredible. Now, not every lost city vanished in catastrophe. Some simply faded. Trade routes changed, rivers moved, empires collapsed. Some simply faded. Trade routes changed, rivers moved, empires collapsed. People left, and over time, sand-buried streets, Jungles swallowed buildings. Water covered harbors. Civilizations disappeared slowly enough that no one noticed the moment they became history. That thought feels strangely emotional. A city full of life one century, silent ruins the next. And perhaps Atlantis survives because it compresses all of those fears into one story. The fear of loss, the fear of forgetting, the fear that even greatness can vanish. But at the same time, Atlantis also represents hope, because people continue searching, continuing wondering, continuing imagining. As long as humans remain curious, Atlantis survives. Not necessarily beneath the ocean, but inside the imagination itself. And honestly, that may be the only place it ever truly needed to exist. Next time, we'll drift into one of the most fascinating parts of the Atlantis story. Why people emotionally need Atlantis to be real. Not historically, emotionally. Because beneath all the theories and underwater ruins, Atlantis tells us something about ourselves, something surprisingly human. So relax. Let the waves carry you gently onward. The lost city is still out there tonight, somewhere between memory and dream. All right, let's continue slowly tonight. The sea is quiet now. Moonlight stretches across the water like silver glass. And somewhere beyond the horizon, Atlantis still drifts through human imagination. Not as a place exactly, but as a feeling. Because here's something interesting. People don't obsess over Atlantis only because of history, or archaeology, or mystery. They obsess over Atlantis because emotionally, it represents something deeply human. A lost golden age. A perfect world that disappeared. And humans have always loved stories like that. Almost every civilization has some version of it. A paradise that once existed. A better time. A forgotten harmony. In the Bible, there's Eden. In Greek mythology, there's the golden age of man. In countless cultures, there are stories about lost kingdoms, peaceful ancestors, or ancient wisdom that vanished long ago. Atlantis fits perfectly into that pattern. A magnificent civilization. Beautiful, advanced, prosperous, and gone forever. There's something strangely comforting about imagining that somewhere in the distant past, people once had everything figured out, even if they clearly didn't. Because according to the story, Atlantis ended very badly. Still, the fantasy remains powerful. Maybe because modern life feels noisy, fast, complicated, and Atlantis feels distant and calm, even in destruction. When artists paint Atlantis, They rarely show taxes or boring meetings or someone arguing about harbor maintenance. No, Atlantis is always glowing towers, quiet blue water, marble temples, and people wearing flowing white robes while staring thoughtfully into the distance. Very aesthetically organized civilization. And honestly, people love that. Now, let's drift into the 1800s for a moment, because this is when Atlantis became truly popular again. Writers, mystics, explorers all became fascinated with the story. Books appeared claiming Atlantis was the source of all civilization, which is a very ambitious claim for a city nobody could find. One writer, Ignatius Donnelly, became especially influential. In 1882, he published a book arguing Atlantis was completely real. Not symbolic, not philosophical, an actual advanced civilization. According to Donnelly, Atlantis explained nearly everything. Ancient pyramids, shared myths, civilization itself. It was basically the historical version of someone pointing at a corkboard covered in red string and saying, "It all connects." And people loved it because certainty is attractive, especially when wrapped in mystery. Donnelly's ideas spread everywhere. Soon, Atlantis became part archaeology, part fantasy, part spiritual movement. Then things became even stranger in the early 1900s. Because naturally, psychics entered the conversation. One famous psychic, Edgar Cayce, claimed Atlantis possessed advanced crystal technology, which sounds less like ancient history and more like a rejected science fiction movie from 1978. According to Cayce, Atlanteans used powerful energy crystals. And honestly, whenever crystals appear in a historical theory, things usually become very complicated very quickly. Still, people listened. Because Atlantis had become more than a legend. It had become a canvas. People projected dreams onto it, fears, hopes, ideas about lost wisdom. And maybe that's why Atlantis survives when so many ancient myths fade away. It changes with each generation. In one era, Atlantis represents moral decay. In another, forgotten technology. Later, spiritual enlightenment. Then, environmental collapse. Every generation reshapes Atlantis into whatever it fears losing most. And that's fascinating, because the city itself remains undefined, flexible, dreamlike. Now, let's pause for a moment and imagine something softer. Imagine wandering through Atlantis before its fall. Not the dramatic final moments, just an ordinary evening. Lanterns glowing beside canals, water moving quietly through the city, people talking softly in open markets, ships rocking gently in the harbor, children laughing somewhere in the distance, musicians playing, priests walking temple corridors. No one knowing their city will someday become legend. That thought carries a quiet sadness, because every civilization assumes it will continue forever, ideally. No city imagines itself becoming ruins. No empire imagines itself becoming a documentary narrated by someone speaking slowly over relaxing music. And yet, eventually, history arrives for everyone. Atlantis simply condenses that reality into one beautiful story. Now, let's talk briefly about ruins themselves, because humans are strangely emotional about abandoned places. A ruined castle, an empty temple, a broken statue. These places remind us that time keeps moving, no matter how permanent things seem. And underwater ruins feel even more emotional somehow, because water preserves silence. A city beneath the ocean feels frozen, suspended between existence and disappearance. That's why Atlantis feels dreamlike, not fully alive, not fully gone. And perhaps that's where its true power lies, not in proving it existed, but in allowing people to imagine what was lost. Now imagine ancient waves slowly rolling over marble streets, fish gliding through forgotten halls, moonlight filtering faintly through deep water. Somewhere below, a city sleeping forever. It's beautiful, a little sad, and perfect for bedtime storytelling, honestly. Next time, we'll drift into modern Atlantis obsession. Movies, books, expeditions, television documentaries with dramatic music and extremely confident narrators. Because once the modern world discovered Atlantis, it absolutely refused to let it rest quietly underwater. And perhaps neither can we. So settle deeper into the calm tonight. The ocean is wide, the stars are above us, and Atlantis still waits peacefully in the distance. All right. We continue tonight beneath a sky full of quiet stars. The ocean moves gently around us, and somewhere out there, Atlantis continues generating books, documentaries, arguments, and very dramatic television specials, because the modern world became completely obsessed with it. And honestly, once cameras, submarines, and the internet arrived, Atlantis never stood a chance of being left alone. Now, by the 20th century, Atlantis had fully escaped from philosophy. It was no longer just a story written by Plato. It had become a global phenomenon. Explorers searched oceans. Writers invented elaborate theories. Mystics claimed secret knowledge. And filmmakers realized audiences would absolutely watch glowing underwater cities for 2 hours, especially if narrated very seriously. Soon, Atlantis appeared everywhere. Adventure novels, fantasy stories, comic books, cartoons, video games, movies with suspiciously shiny underwater temples. At some point, Atlantis became less of a lost city and more of a full-time career opportunity. And to be fair, the idea is irresistible. A forgotten civilization beneath the sea? That's practically designed in a laboratory to fascinate humans. Now, let's drift gently into the age of exploration. Because during the 1900s, real underwater archaeology began advancing rapidly. Divers explored shipwrecks, researchers mapped coastlines, technology improved, and every time someone found unusual rocks underwater, someone nearby whispered, Atlantis. It became almost automatic. Underwater wall? Atlantis. Ancient harbor? Atlantis. Interesting looking fish swimming near ruins? Probably Atlantis somehow. The ocean became filled with possibilities, and imagination rushed in to occupy every unexplored corner. Television loved this, especially documentaries from the 1970s and 1980s. You know the type. Dramatic music, slow camera zooms, a narrator speaking with absolute confidence while showing blurry underwater footage. Could this mysterious structure be evidence of Atlantis? Usually, the structure was one unusual rock, but the excitement was genuine. And honestly, there's something comforting about that enthusiasm. People wanted wonder, wanted mystery, wanted something magical hidden beneath ordinary reality. Atlantis provided exactly that. Now, let's talk briefly about expeditions. Because many people genuinely dedicated their lives to searching for Atlantis. Some were archaeologists, others were wealthy adventurers with boats and optimism. A dangerous combination historically. They searched the Atlantic Ocean, the Mediterranean, the Caribbean, even near Bimini, where strange underwater rock formations became famous as the Bimini Road. Supporters claimed it was evidence of an ancient road or harbor. Skeptics said natural geology. And both sides continued arguing for decades. Because humans enjoy mysteries, but they especially enjoy debating mysteries. Now imagine being one of these explorers, standing on a research vessel at sunrise, salt air drifting across the deck, the ocean stretching endlessly around you. Somewhere below, maybe ruins, maybe nothing, maybe just rocks with excellent publicity. Still, the search itself becomes meaningful. That's important, because sometimes people are less interested in finding Atlantis than in the possibility that it exists. A solved mystery ends. An unsolved one continues forever. And Atlantis survives precisely because it remains unresolved. Now let's drift into fiction for a moment, because storytellers absolutely adore Atlantis. Why? Because it combines everything audiences love: beauty, tragedy, mystery, ancient knowledge, catastrophic destruction, and underwater scenery. Writers imagined Atlanteans as wise philosophers, or magical priests, or advanced scientists, or suspiciously attractive people wearing glowing jewelry. Depends on the decade, honestly. Sometimes Atlantis becomes a utopia. Other times, a warning. Sometimes both simultaneously. And through every version, the same emotional core remains. A beautiful world lost beneath the waves. Now, here's something quietly interesting. Atlantis rarely appears as ugly, or ordinary, or disappointing. Nobody imagines Atlantis filled with muddy streets and tax disputes. No. Atlantis must always feel magnificent. Because it represents idealized loss. Humans do this constantly. We romanticize vanished things. Lost eras, old cities, ancient worlds. Distance softens flaws. Memory edits details. And eventually, even imaginary places become nostalgic. That's remarkable when you think about it. People feel nostalgia for a city that may never have existed. Now let's pause and imagine the ocean itself again. Dark water stretching endlessly beneath moonlight. Silent currents moving slowly over ancient stone. Whether Atlantis existed or not, the sea certainly contains countless forgotten histories. Ships, ports, villages, temples, real lives swallowed by time. And perhaps Atlantis survives because it symbolizes all of them together. Every lost place, every vanished civilization, every memory slipping quietly beneath the surface. There's something strangely peaceful about that tonight. Not frightening, just humbling. Civilizations rise, people build beautiful things. Time passes, the world changes. And somewhere beneath the waves, history sleeps quietly on. Next time, we'll move toward the final stretch of our journey. We'll explore why Atlantis continues to matter in the modern world, and why humans may never stop searching for lost worlds, even when we secretly understand the real treasure was always the story itself. So breathe slowly. Relax deeper into the calm. The ocean is still waiting for us. All right, we've reached the quiet final stretch of tonight's journey. The sea is calm now. The stars above us feel distant and soft. And somewhere beyond the horizon of imagination, Atlantis still glimmers faintly beneath the water. Not fully real, not fully unreal, just enduring. And perhaps that's the perfect ending for a legend like this. Because Atlantis was never only about archaeology. It was never only about maps or ruins or underwater expeditions. Atlantis survives because it speaks to something ancient inside human beings. Something emotional, something restless. The desire to believe there are still mysteries left in the world. That somewhere beyond what we already know, something beautiful remains hidden. And honestly, that's a comforting thought before sleep. Now, think about how many generations have imagined Atlantis. Ancient Greeks, Roman writers, medieval scholars, Victorian explorers, modern filmmakers, internet theorists at 3 in the morning, all staring toward the sea, wondering. Empires rose and collapsed while the story continued. Languages changed, borders changed. Entire civilizations disappeared. But Atlantis remained, floating quietly through human imagination, like a dream that refuses to fade after waking. And perhaps that persistence tells us something important. Humans need wonder. Not constantly, not dramatically, just enough mystery to remind us the world is still larger than our understanding. Atlantis provides that mystery perfectly because it exists in uncertainty, too famous to disappear, too unproven to settle, too beautiful to abandon. And honestly, that balance may be exactly why the story survives. If Atlantis were proven real tomorrow, fully confirmed, carefully mapped, explained in exact detail, something would quietly disappear from the legend. The dream itself. Mysteries lose a certain softness once completely solved. And Atlantis is almost entirely softness. Fog, moonlight, memory, ruins beneath dark water. It lives more comfortably in imagination than reality. Now let's imagine one final scene tonight. A lone ship crossing calm water under the stars. No engines, just the slow sound of waves against wood. Far below the surface, silent ruins rest in darkness. Columns covered in seaweed. Broken staircases disappearing into blue shadow. Statues watching patiently through centuries of drifting sand. Maybe they belong to Atlantis. Maybe not. But the feeling remains the same. A quiet awareness that countless stories came before us. Countless people lived, dreamed, built, struggled, loved, and disappeared long before our own brief moment in history. And somehow, that thought doesn't feel sad tonight. It feels peaceful. Because the world continues. The sea continues. The stars continue. And stories continue too. That may be the real immortality humans achieve. Not eternal cities, not perfect civilizations, but stories remembered across time. In that sense, Atlantis never sank at all. It survived in imagination, in curiosity, in whispered conversations, in books beside beds, in documentaries watched late at night, in dreams of lost worlds beneath dark water. And perhaps that is enough. So now, let the ocean grow still. Let the stars fade softly into the distance. And let your thoughts drift gently away, like waves disappearing into the night. There is nothing left to solve tonight. No final answers waiting beneath the sea. Only calm water, quiet mystery, and the soft comfort of knowing some stories are meant to remain unfinished. Thank you for drifting through this dreamlike journey with me. Rest well tonight. And somewhere beneath the endless dark ocean, Atlantis is still waiting. And before sleep finally carries you away tonight, just remember something gentle. The world has always been full of mysteries, some hidden beneath oceans, some buried beneath sand, and some quietly resting inside the human imagination. We spend so much of life searching for answers, trying to explain everything, trying to understand every shadow and every story. But maybe not every mystery exists to be solved. Maybe some are simply meant to make us wonder, to slow us down, to remind us how vast this world really is. Tonight, somewhere far beyond busy cities and glowing screens, the ocean is still moving quietly beneath the moonlight. Soft waves crossing dark water, ancient silence stretching endlessly below. And whether Atlantis was real or only a dream, for a little while tonight, it felt real enough. And perhaps that's the magic of stories. So let your thoughts become lighter now. The noise of the day drift farther away. There's nowhere you need to be, nothing left you need to do. Just breathe slowly, rest deeply, and allow sleep to arrive gently, like calm waves reaching the shore. Good night, my friend. And until our next quiet journey through history, sleep peacefully beneath the stars. And now, our long journey across the dark, ancient sea slowly comes to an end. The waves are quieter now. The stars above the ocean burn softly in the distance. And somewhere beneath those endless waters, Atlantis still sleeps peacefully inside the human imagination. Maybe it was real. Maybe it was only a story. A dream created thousands of years ago by people who feared losing everything they had built. But tonight, that mystery no longer feels important. Because sometimes the beauty of a story is not in finding the answer. It's in the feeling it leaves behind. The calm, the wonder, the quiet thought that somewhere beyond what we know, there may still be forgotten worlds waiting silently in the dark. So now, let the ocean drift farther away. Let your thoughts become softer, slower, lighter. There is nothing left to search for tonight. No ruins to uncover. No secrets left to solve. Only silence. Only calm water beneath the moonlight. Your day is over now. Your mind can finally rest. Let every thought float away like gentle waves disappearing into the sea. And as you slowly fall asleep, imagine the ancient city resting quietly beneath the deep blue water. Peaceful, still, untouched by time. Thank you for joining me on tonight's dreamlike journey. And whenever the world feels too loud, too fast, or too heavy, another quiet story will be waiting for you here. Good night. Sleep peacefully beneath the stars.